Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about Yakuza 6, which I just finished earlier today as of this recording. So my experience with the series so far has been I played everything prior to this game, so Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5 remastered, and yeah, now it's Yakuza 6. So much like my other videos, I kind of like to talk about like what I knew about the game overall before playing it. So it boils down to just like a couple of things. Mainly the engine that the game runs on was already used in Yakuza Kiwami 2, so I was already familiar with the engine that this game used since this was the first game that actually had been used with that engine. I kind of already knew this just from looking at the box art of the game, but there was a baby who you can kind of assume whose baby it is. And then I've had a little bit spoiled. I had one thing spoiled for me regarding the plot, which is kind of a disappointment. And then I knew that everyone hated the baby minigame, which I can confer on. I don't like the baby minigame. Anyway, moving on. So the basic overview of the plot is that after the events of Yakuza 5, Kiryu is sent to jail for 4 years because someone needed to take a fall for what happened, and when he returns to the orphanage in Okinawa after 4 years, he finds out his daughter Haruka just ran away, and when he finds out, where she went off to, he finds out that she had a baby. And at the same time in Kamurocho, the Tojo clan is now at a turf war with the Sayo Triad, just fighting it out in the streets. So, basic overview of gameplay of just Yakuza as a whole. It's a action RPG, but so you have your staples, which are things like weak attacks linking into stronger attacks, but one of the best things about Yakuza in particular is that it has a lot of style and substance to it. So it kind of changes based on what games you're playing. So like in 0 and Kiwami 1, you had style changing, which really kept things fresh. But with every single game, you have these things called heat actions. So like depending on what circumstance the character is in, they're going to do a lot of damage in some either very serious but brutal way, or like a really silly but still brutal way. So like for instance, if in Yakuza 6, if you bring a fight into a grocery store and you get the heat attack icon pop up right where you're by the register, Kiryu will throw the guy into the microwave and tell the worker to turn on the microwave with his head still in it. And that's how he does damage to him. So it can be wacky stuff like that. But one of the more serious ones would just be like, he's holding a knife and he just like stabs it into him and then like knees the knife even further into him. So that's like the more serious and also brutal one. But I think that the use of heat actions like keeps what would be a normally sort of like, average, more mundane sort of combat system into something that's always more fresh and exciting, because there's always some new condition you can do to do some funny or serious heat attack that just always keeps the gameplay feeling fresh. But yeah, because this is one of my normal videos, I talk about the pros and the cons of the game. So the first thing I will say is that the game does run really well on a PS5. I looked up like how exactly it runs, and it was kind of how I imagined it. Run at 1080p at a locked 30 frames a second. I do kind of wish that there was like an updated PS5 version of the game, like what they did with Judgment later on, where they had a PS5 release that came with the DLC, and you get a better frame rate, better resolution, because it's just running on PS5 hardware. But I mean, it still runs really nice, but I'm sure they might do that eventually, but they haven't done that at this point in time. But anyway, the next thing I will say very well might be like my favorite thing about this game. Well, maybe it's definitely in the top 3. Is that the story is just one of the best of the entire series. But because I don't like talking about the story, because, you know, someone watching this might not have played it yet. I'm not going to get into that, but I do think it is absolutely incredible. And speaking of story, the new characters that they introduce, I think, are a lot of fun. Mainly the Hirose family from Onomichi is very friendly and nice. I don't know how else to put it without really getting to like specific instances that could be spoilery, but I'll just say that I did like a lot of the new characters that they introduced in this game, and I think that they're a great addition to the series overall. But yeah, now more gameplay focused pros. The EXP system is good again. It seems like it's either hit or miss. Like Yakuza 3, bad EXP system. Yakuza 4, good EXP system. Yakuza 5, bad EXP system. And now we're back to good again. So it's similar to Kiwami 2, because it runs on the same engine, that you have like different types of experiences that you can get based on whatever you're doing. So if you're fighting, you're going to get more physical based experience points, but if you're doing something like visiting the cabaret club, you're going to get more like non-physical ones. Like you might like be able to get like charm points instead of like strength points, which can be used for different things. But yeah, I think that overall I like how this new EXP system works, except for like there's always one, usually charm, that I need, but because I'm fighting a lot more than going to stuff like cabaret clubs, I need it a lot more than literally everything else. But I mean, I still think the system is very good overall, because it does encourage you to, you know, do more than just fight. And speaking of gameplay, it's not Yakuza if there wasn't like a bunch of other mini games in there for little to no reason at all. So you know, you got your staples like baseball, karaoke, mahjong, darts, you know, whatever array of arcade games there are in there, which in this one it's Virtua Fighter and Puyo Puyo. But now you get some new cool ones like chat rooms. We don't talk about that one. The gym, Kiryu just hitting the gym, and spearfishing, which I thought was really fun. But yeah, I mean, it's Yakuza. They're throwing in mini games. I am a little bit disappointed that we didn't get bowling. I felt like that was a staple of the series. Yeah, no bowling, no golf, no ping pong. I liked ping pong. They had that in Yakuza 4. But yeah, you get most of your staples. You know, karaoke is obviously the most important one, because we just want to hear him singing. We have to hear him singing. But yeah, moving on from that, kind of more back to a story-based thing. I'm not going to talk about this for very long, but I will just throw it out there. I do think that the villain of this game is it's on the upper half versus the lower half. I do think the villain was very well written. Versus which I would say, like, I don't think the villains are quite well as written in 0 and 4 and 5, but I think that in those games specifically, they get the job done. But I think since Yakuza is such a story-heavy series, you do need some really good villains like you have in 1, 2, 3, and now 6. So another thing about this game is that the previous 2 games, they had you split up between 4 characters, and they'd each have their own saga, and then come back together at the end and basically put all the pieces together and solve the thing. They'd solve the plot. But in this game, it's back to just Kiryu only, which I do think is probably for the best, because I feel like if they did another thing of just like, oh, it's four different guys again, I feel like that would have started getting old at this point. So yeah, I am glad that Kiryu is just the main protagonist again. Oh yeah, Yakuza. It's not Yakuza if there isn't like a bunch of fun sub-stories that you can do all over town. And I will say that like the overall quality of them all is very nice. The only thing about them that it is nice, but like I felt like it was very unnecessary, is that they had to voice every single line of dialogue. Because honestly, I just kind of skipped most of it because I don't want to spend like... It takes so much longer to wait for them to read the voice lines for the dialogue than to just read it myself and then, you know, skip it, go to the next line. I felt it was unnecessary, but I mean, for some people who just want to listen to it, I guess that's great. But yeah, because this is now running in the Dragon engine, this is in Japan. This came out in 2016, so this is like the first like PS4 exclusive Yakuza. Everything else at that point had also been releasing on PS3. So because they're using this new engine that was only really possible on PS4 hardware, the graphics do look like really, really good. They even hold up still 7 years later in 2023. So I will say that I'm really impressed with how they built this engine, because this looks like comparably almost as good as like stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which would come out in 2020. That's like a late PS4 game, and I thought that game looked incredible. But this does definitely challenge that, I think, in terms of how good like the graphics and lighting are and everything. This one is spoilery, so I'm going to be very vague about it, but I will just say that the ending to the entire game is potentially my favorite in the entire series. That's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to spoil it, but I'm debating if it's my favorite or if it's my second favorite, so that's how you know it was really, really good. But yeah, it's, as I have said probably 3 times already at this point, because it's a Yakuza game. Yeah, it's a Yakuza game. The soundtrack is really, really good. They never sleep on the Yakuza soundtrack, ever. It's always slapping. And yeah, this one is just like the rest. It's really good, really solid game. A really solid soundtrack. So something that they fixed, I'd kind of been complaining about in the past couple ones, just because I'd had this in Yakuza 0, 1, and 2, is the running was not a thing in 3, 4, and 5. So now running is back, which makes traversing just 100 times better than before. And taxis, like Kiwami 2, will take you spots in the middle of the city and not just on the edges of town, which is very nice. So that overall just makes like getting from place to place so much better. This is just going to be for me, because I know probably most people didn't initially play this on PS5, but the load times were actually like really, really quick, like quicker than the less demanding games that were kind of almost also PS3 games running on PS4, running on PS5. Like Zero and Kiwami. But I don't know how that works, but it does. But yeah, the load times are really, really quick and responsive on PS5. And like a lot of other ones, not necessarily all of them, but Yakuza 6 just has a side story, and not a sub-story, just a side story, where it's like kind of like not quite as big as the main story, but not nearly as small as a sub-story, where Kiryu has to help some guy named Joe he meets in Onomichi to basically make his friends be good again, because they are terrorizing people with a gang in Kamurocho. And it, gameplay-wise, is very similar to the Clan Creator in Kiwami 2, except instead of like what is essentially like a tower defense where you just have them guard your stuff, it's more so just like send all your guys out to defeat the enemy. So I like how it wasn't like the exact same, even though 6 technically came out before Kiwami 2, but most people are probably going to play Kiwami 2 before 6. So, but yeah, that's about it for everything that I liked about the game. There's really a lot to like. I think this game is great overall. And other things I'm not super duper fond about, these are the things I didn't really like about the game. A couple of these are just small things, but one of them I think is actually really important. So first off, so this is just a me personally thing, but I know other people don't really like this as much as well. I kind of like to 100% my games, like, in certain areas. And one of them for Yakuza so far has been, like, eating every single piece of food in the entire game. Just, like, 100%ing, like, every single restaurant, basically. I'm not going to 100% every minigame or anything like that, because that would take, like, twice as long on my runtime of the game. But that's something I do like to do for completion. But they decided to just not tell you what you have and haven't eaten on the menu anymore, despite the fact that this was a feature that has been in the past like 4 games. They just decided not to include that in this one, even though in the very next game, Kiwami 2, it would have this feature. So that was very strange. You basically have to check your completion list every single time you want to know what you hadn't eaten, which would just take time out of the way, which you could have been doing literally anything else. But I guess for people who don't care about 100%ing restaurants, that doesn't really matter at all. Another thing, just like certain areas of the game would like the lighting would like glitch. Like it would be something like, say I'm in a corner, like it's outside but it's in a corner, but it should be shady, and most of it is shady. But sometimes like the lighting is like glitched up and it doesn't look shady anymore, and it just like goes back and forth between being shady and not shady. So that was something I noticed like in probably two times overall, but it's not a huge deal, but it's definitely worth noting. Another thing that I do not understand whatsoever, kind of like the restaurant thing, is with the sub-stories themselves are okay, but finding them is just a complete pain, because usually you'd be able to find them on your maps, be like, okay, this is where you start your sub-story. Or if it's Kiwami or Zero, you get an item that tells you where the sub-stories are at. So I looked up if there was anything like that, and apparently there's just nothing at all. So if you want to do the sub-stories, you just have to like get lucky and run into one. So I feel like overall I did the least amount of sub-stories in this game just because I didn't really run into a whole lot of them. So I think that could have been like really easily fixed, because I know that was in Kiwami 2 as well. It would show you where you need to go to start your sub-story. So yeah, that was not very fun. But oh yeah, the baby minigame. Why did they decide that was a good idea? It's not that it isn't in fact like a really bad thing. It's just that it happens so frequently when you're holding Haruto that it's like I would literally walk like maybe 20 steps, and then the 2-minute long minigame loads up again when I'm trying to go somewhere. And it's like, okay, maybe if this was happening every couple of minutes, not when I literally started walking for 10 seconds. Because I would literally do it. I'd walk 10 seconds, check my menu for something, start walking another 2 steps. Oh, the baby minigame started again. He started crying again. But thankfully, that only happened in like one chapter. So that was the most annoying chapter just for that. But I still don't understand who thought that was a good idea. And this last one was something I initially thought was like a con, but now I'm more so feeling mixed feelings on it. Is the combat overall is not quite as fluid as the rest of the series is. But it kind of like Kiwami 2, except I did feel like that one had a lot more potential than this. Because it mainly feels like, because you're ragdolling like a lot from like any strong hit at all, just like, it just feels like whatever you do just knocks people over. Or, quite frankly, when you're in the streets encountering someone, the quickest thing to do is just grab something and start swinging it around till everyone is like knocked out. And then when it comes to like boss battles, then you actually have real gameplay combat, but you're also still ragdolling. And I think just like overall, it's just like a lot less polished than the rest. It's a lot more sillier. So in that terms, you could say it is more or less like Yakuza, since Yakuza is the most silliest and serious game I've probably ever played. So I guess some people think it's more in line with its more silly side, and some people think it's more like a detriment to its serious side. But I realized this literally in the final boss battle that once you do learn like some of the like more advanced tech stuff, like dashing out of attacks to like dodge stuff and parry them, that it does actually start feeling a lot better then. But it took me like the entire game to basically figure that out. So I feel like that's more so a problem on the game's fault, considering that didn't happen in any other game. But yeah, that about covers it for everything I thought about this game. So I think this is just my gut feeling. I might change my mind later, but for right now, I'm thinking it's a 7 out of 7. I'm going to insert the tier list now with my updated views of the games. I'm really, really liking this series. I'm actually getting a little bit sad that like it feels like it's only been like 9 months, but I played like 7 games already. I'm nearly done with the series, so I only got like a couple games left. But I guess, yeah, Yakuza 8's coming out next year, so I mean, and it's not like the game's stopped, but once I'm all caught up, I'm gonna get bored. But anyway, yeah, speaking of what's next, I'm not gonna play Yakuza 7 or Like a Dragon, whatever people call it. I don't know. But I'll be playing Judgment next, and then that. So yeah, look out for Judgment whenever I decide to make a video on that. But yeah, thanks for watching. If this video was helpful, I'd like a comment or something. Or if I just want to kind of hear what everyone else's general thoughts are, because I'm not really quite sure what the general opinion of this game is, but I think it's definitely really, really good. But yeah, see y'all later.